Baking. With a 3D.js object selected, we can see on the active 3D.js object menu buttons for bake and delete bake. This is a way of baking the camera update information so it no longer needs to be calculated live each frame. If I use active camera for this object and then give my camera some animation keyframes, I'll set my timeline to 100 frames and I'll add a keyframe for the camera's location and rotation at the start of my timeline. At the end of my timeline, I'll change the position of the camera. And again, add rotation and location keyframes. I can see that I have a very simple camera animation. And because this object is currently using the active camera, the faces are updating accordingly each frame. If I now press the bake button, I get a warning. Baking can lead to very high file sizes, and that baking shouldn't be used with very large scans. The baking is based on Blender's native bake nodes within geometry nodes. This can be great for smaller objects or single object scans like this, but for large scene scans, it can be a huge amount of data, which leads to a large file size or can crash or freeze Blender. This is a Blender limitation that will hopefully improve with future Blender updates. The second warning is that the blend file is unsaved. Right now, the add-on is set up to save bake data within a saved blend file. If I save my file, the warning is now gone and I can see options for baking. Here I see 3D.js render and edit modifiers, or 3D.js render, edit, animation, and sort modifiers. Because of the way Blender's baking works, we can bake from any of these modifiers, and all modifiers before that one will be baked. If I were to bake the 3D.js render and edit modifiers, and I had some edit modifiers applied, such as the camera cull and decimate, we would be baking using the 3D.js render modifier, and all modifiers above it would be baked too. If I was to bake render, edit, animation, and sort modifiers, I would be using the sorter modifier, which is used for HQ mode, and all modifiers before it would be baked. Right now I have HQ mode enabled, and I've just enabled the camera cull modifier, and let's imagine I'm using the decimate modifier a little. So I want to bake the data for all of these modifiers. I can do that by pressing bake, baking all the modifiers. I can see that a progress bar appears at the bottom of my screen, and on the timeline I can see some highlighting to show that there is baked data for the active object. I'll press OK to close this menu. I can now scrub through the timeline quite smoothly. At this point I can see that the camera cull modifier is removing the feet of this object. If I disable the camera cull modifier manually, I can see it's having no effect. If I disable the render modifier, it's also doing nothing about face orientations. And if I change the camera view and press update to view, I can see that the object isn't responding also. All updates and edit modifier updates are now baked into this object's data. And to remind us, we have the timeline highlighting, but also the active object menu has changed. We no longer have controls for enable or disable camera updates, and the delete bake button is highlighted red. If I decide that I want to change my animation and I want to rebake at a later date, I can press delete bake and the interface will return to normal. Now my modifiers behave as expected when enabling or disabling them. If you ever bake data and then crash your Blender scene or move this object into another blend file without first deleting the bake, you might find that the interface is locked even if there isn't any bake data present. A quick way to just refresh the interface is to press delete bake even if you think there is no data baked.